This is Chapter 2, Lesson 3, and we're going to start where we left off in our previous lesson, talking about hydrogen bonds and an application of that with the properties of water. Recall that hydrogen bonds are caused by the weak electrostatic attraction between the slight positive charge of one part of a molecule and the slight negative charge of a different molecule. And as shown here, water, a polar molecule, can form hydrogen bonds with ammonia, but water can also form hydrogen bonds with itself. And that brings us to the emergent properties of water. These properties, if you remember, emergent properties are new properties that emerge because of the interactions at lower levels of organization as we go to higher levels of organization. So the low level of organization here would be the water molecules themselves, the molecules. Remember, that's the second level of organization as we go from simple to complex. So it started with atoms and then molecules. An individual water molecule itself does not exhibit hydrogen bonding, but when you have other water molecules, they can hydrogen bond. And through those hydrogen bonds, these emergent properties arise. So we're going to first just define these emergent properties of water and then take a closer look at them through examples on the next slides. One property of water because of hydrogen bonding is that molecules expand upon freezing, which is why the solid state, or ice, is less dense than liquid water. Another emergent property of water is that it is the universal solvent. It also moderates temperature and can perform something called cohesion. So let's take a closer look at these through some examples. Starting with the first one, that molecules expand upon freezing. What we see here are three different representations of the states of water: ice versus warm and cold water. And we're zooming into a volume that would represent a circle that would represent the same volume of ice compared to warm or cold water. And so what I want you to take note of, and even maybe try to count, are the number of water molecules in each of those circles. If nothing else, just kind of eyeball it. So you could say like one clearly has less, one clearly has the most. So I immediately draw my eye to the ice, probably because it has those dashed green lines. But ice, as you can see here in that circle, has the fewest number of water molecules compared to warm water, which has a little bit more, and cold water with the most. So now let's go back to the ice and try to understand what's happening there that makes ice have the least number of water molecules in a particular area. And if you might remember from chemistry, density equals mass over volume. So if we have the same volume here, you can just look at the number of water molecules as an approximation for the mass. And so the density really is reflected by how many water molecules are in each of those circles as a simplification of this. So with that being said, ice is less dense than warm water, which is less dense than cold water. So with the ice, those green dashed lines are the hydrogen bonds, because notice how they're forming between the oxygen, which is the red circle. Let me grab that laser pen there. And the hydrogen, or the blue part of the molecule. So those are indeed the hydrogen bonds. Now what's interesting about ice is how those hydrogen bonds create a very specific angle in between those molecules. So there's an angle on where I'm showing the laser right now, and that angle would be the same on the opposite side for that same water molecule, and the one that's its neighbor. Those would all be very regular angles. And then the supplement to that would be the the angle that's on the top and the bottom, and they're all the same as well. So it forms kind of like a crystalline structure within the ice, and that's between the water molecules because of the hydrogen bonds. And actually, that's what's kind of spreading them out, pushing them out, because that angle needs to be consistent and throughout the entire structure of the ice. So you don't see that in the warm water or the cold water. Although there could be some hydrogen bonds that do form, they're going to be more temporary than in the ice. So warm water has a lot of kinetic energy, thermal energy associated with it. These molecules are moving around, bouncing off of each other. So there could be a temporary bond that then quickly breaks. So that's why they're not shown there. And warm water, the molecules have more kinetic energy from the heat compared to the cold water. They're moving much more slowly. And if the water gets cold enough to freezing, then those hydrogen bonds will start to form and those molecules will start to take on the arrangement of those shown in the ice. So something interesting to think about is what would happen if ice wasn't less dense than liquid water? Why would this matter for biology? Can you think of a reason why that's important, that ice is less dense than water and ice floats on top of water? Well, one example would be the impact it would have on animals that depend on that floating ice, like a polar bear. If ice didn't float, the polar bear might lose part of its habitat. They depend on that ice to rest, perhaps to feed, to have their young, and to even migrate to different places to get food. They can't be swimming all the time. They'll just use way too much energy. So that might lead to the extinction of polar bears. See if you can come up with any other examples, and perhaps we'll share in class. Another property of water related to the polarity of the molecule is its ability to act as a solvent. So here we have an example of sodium chloride, an ionic compound being dissolved in water because the negative charge of the oxygen atom is attracted to the positive. So I was pointing to the wrong thing. So the oxygens would be the red balls on the water. So those oxygens are being attracted to the sodium ions within the sodium chloride. And so they're breaking that salt down by forming these hydration shells around the sodium ions and the chlorine ions. So there's a hydration shell where there's sodium surrounded by the oxygen sides of water molecules, and then other hydration shells where the chlorine is in the middle, surrounded by the water. But notice that the hydrogen side of the water molecules are actually facing the chlorine, which is the anion. So why should we care about this in biology? Well, one application would be in our own bodies. When we eat food, many of these foods are complex molecules, including salts, and our body needs to be able to break those complex molecules down into their components, absorb that, and then use it for different purposes in the body. So we need to have water in order to do that. Our body is mostly made of water in terms of its makeup, but you also have to consume liquids to facilitate this process and aid with breakdown of food and digestion. Another emergent property of water caused by hydrogen bonding is its ability to moderate temperature. When water gets heated up, like if we had the ice thawing and then heated that water up, hydrogen bonds would start to break between those water molecules. And through that process, energy is absorbed by those molecules as heat. So water, because of all of those hydrogen bonds, has the ability to absorb a lot of heat. And this is why in chemistry you probably learn water has a high specific heat. That's the reason why it has a high specific heat. And in contrast to other liquids, it has a relatively high specific heat compared to other substances. Vice versa, as water cools, that allows for more hydrogen bonds to form because the molecules aren't moving around and bouncing off of each other as fast, and energy is released as heat. So let's try to get a better understanding of this through an example. Another one regarding the human body here that we probably all can relate to in Florida, being that it's been a brutally hot summer and basically you walk outside and you're instantly sweating. So what is sweat? How does this relate to water's ability to moderate temperature in our body? Well, sweat is your body's way of maintaining body temperature when the temperature of the air is higher than the temperature of your body, which seems to be pretty often here in Florida. So you have in your skin sweat glands, which are actually cells that secrete the sweat, taking it from adjacent cells that are, losing water, and then releasing it through pores on the surface of your skin. In this state here, the water would be liquid, all the way up until the point where it evaporates off the surface of your skin and becomes a gas. In order for that bond to break between the liquid on your sweat pore, like the dew on your skin, that's liquid, in order for it to actually become gas, a hydrogen bond needs to break. In order for that hydrogen bond to break, there needs to be energy to break that bond. That energy comes from your body. And that's why when you sweat, your body gets cooler. It's not actually the sensation of the sweat on your skin, the wind blowing over, that making you feel cool. That might, make you feel cool. But what's really regulating your body temperature is the energy that's being used by your body to break that bond to cause the water to go from liquid to gas. And this is how the human body and other animals that can regulate their body temperature through sweating are able to maintain that homeostasis for body temperature. Again, it all goes back to hydrogen bonding. All right, the last property of water caused by hydrogen bonding is coming up, cohesion. Cohesion is the ability of water molecules to bond to other water molecules, as shown here in this illustration. Always you have the oxygen forming a hydrogen bond with hydrogen. And it can be with one or many molecules of water. This phenomenon can be very important for living things because living things are mostly made of water in their cells, and in some living things like plants, water is also a mode of transportation throughout the plant. And in that water, there could be important nutrients that different parts of the plant need. So we have a Bioflix in Pearson that has a little animation showing this, and I would encourage you to go check that out in the study module. So you can see in a tree how water can make it from the roots in the ground to the tallest leaves on the tree. One of the mechanisms for that is cohesion, but there is a bit more to it than just that. In fact, let's see if I can make a note here on the slide. Apologize if it's messy. I'm using a mouse. So we have cohesion. In addition, in a plant, another process that allows water to be transported is adhesion. And then the third would be transpiration, which is basically the evaporation of water from the leaves of plants, or how plants sweat, just like we do. They can sweat to maintain homeostasis for their temperature. Adhesion is when the water molecules are sticking to something inside of the plant, like there's a tissue called xylem. It's basically like a hollow tube or a tunnel that runs through the stems and the trunk of the plant and transports water to other parts of the plant. So those the inside lining of the xylem is where water molecules can also adhere through adhesion, where water sticks to, this is painfully slow, so I'm trying to talk and type at the same time. Water sticks to non-water molecules. And then the third one that I'll hopefully get to right in a minute is the transpiration. And that's really what drives this whole process to go against gravity. Water without transpiration would not be able to rise from the roots to the tallest leaves of the tree. Transpiration, that evaporation from the leaves, is what initiates the whole process. All right, finally got that done. Transpiration might take a minute. So let me talk a little bit more on this slide while I'm typing. There is a really cool experiment you can do at home to prove this and observe cohesion, adhesion, and transpiration. If you pick up some celery with the full stalk with the leaves from the grocery store, and you put it in a cup with food coloring, after sometimes as little as 1 day, you'll start to see some of that color appear in the leaves or even in the stalk. And that's because the water first is evaporating through the top of the plant, either from the leaves or perhaps even through the stalk because it's cut. So, water's going to evaporate from somewhere. And you'll notice the color being deposited in the upper parts of the celery because it's moving with the water, much like nutrients in the plant would move to other parts of the plant along with the water. So the celery inside has little tubes. You'll see like little holes. You'll notice the color from the food coloring kind of stains them. You could even cut the celery open in half and notice that the stain is inside of those little circles. So that shows how the adhesion occurred, where the water, including the food coloring, stuck to the inside of the celery tissue. And then the water themselves sticks together through cohesion, kind of forming a chain link of water molecules as they travel up the plant. Okay, so I encourage you to try that. You could even do it with like white carnations and turn them into different colors, maybe for someone that you care about as a nice gesture. Or the celery you could even eat after you use the food coloring because it's edible, it's not toxic. I apologize for this. I wasn't thinking about how I would write on the slide. So I'm going to put water evaporating from the leaves, oh boy, of the plants. I'll do something different next time where I can write water evaporating from plants. I'll just go with that. Looks like my daughter wrote this with a crayon. Oh my. Okay, so I wanted to give one more example of cohesion and a property you might have heard of water related to that is high surface tension, which is caused because of cohesion. This is because water molecules are held together. So the water strider bug here that has like a really spread out body, a high surface area, is able to actually walk or stride along the surface of the water because it's not breaking the surface tension of the water. It's not basically breaking the hydrogen bonds between the water molecules because it's not putting a lot of weight bearing load against it to break them. So for some organisms that have that really high surface area and they don't cause the hydrogen bonds to break, they can in fact walk across the surface of the water. You could also demonstrate this if you have a penny. Another lovely attempt here of drawing with my mouse. You get a penny or any coin, if you have any laying around, and you put drops of water on the penny, drop by drop by drop, and you notice how many drops of water you can fit on the surface of the penny. Eventually, there'll be one drop that causes the water to just spill off the surface, but you'd be surprised how much water can fit on the surface of a penny. In fact, if you looked at more of like a side view of the penny, and let's see if I can change the pen to blue at least to show water, it would look kind of like a dome. That's the water. And as long as you didn't break the surface tension by putting too many drops. So what's happening here is also related to hydrogen bonding and the high surface tension. The water molecules next to each other are all forming hydrogen bonds. So all of these down to the surface of the penny, which is also causing adhesion of the water to the surface of the penny. That's what's kind of holding it all together there. And the reason you get that kind of dome shape is because of the molecules at the surface are being pulled inward. There's nothing above them, so the hydrogen bonding is all going kind of down and inward away from the surface. So that's why it forms that dome in addition to the adhesion to the surface it's sticking to. So it's a very simple thing to just demonstrate and have an understanding and a visual about how water has this property of high surface tension, but it's caused because of the cohesion, which is an effect of the hydrogen bonds that form between the water, which is a polar molecule. So, all right, we'll leave it at that for today. Thank you for your patience with my lovely drawings and writing on the slide.